Well, joining us now is the Shadow Minister for Climate Action, Greg Hunt, who's also criticised this advertising campaign. Greg Hunt, thanks for joining us. First, what do you say to the argument from Greg Combet that this $12 million is clearly far less than the $120 million spent on both the work choices and the GST campaigns?
Well, firstly, it's our watch and our time and our responsibility. And we went with a cut of $50 million in advertising budget, so we take responsibility for this time and this watch.
So you wash your hands of the Howard government.
But secondly, this adds insult to injury, that people are going to have to pay higher electricity and gas and petrol prices, not to mention groceries, and now they're going to have to pay for the advertising campaign. There is a very real question here. $12 million was announced, but it appears that there's $13 million already in the budget. So the question for the government is this really a $25 million advertising campaign? And if so, why not be honest about that simple fact?
Isn't that $13 million you refer to in the budget about a public engagement campaign? I know it could be semantic, but it's not actual money for advertising like this $12 million is. Well,
it appears that there is a global budget of up to $25 million. Right. $12 million today is on top of the $13 million which was there previously, and it's a nakedly political abuse of public money for partisan purposes.
But even if it is $25 million in total here, it still is far, far less than the $120 million spent on the GST advertising, the $120 million spent on the work choices advertising. Now, I know you may not want to be responsible for what the Howard government did, but comparatively, it's not a lot of money to advertise a significant economic reform.
Well, about a year ago, we saw a national emergency declared for the mining tax ad campaign, and obviously they now have a polling emergency, and so they're going to wheel out a carbon tax ad campaign. There's no agreement, there's no detail, there's no legislation, but there is an advertising campaign. It is clearly an abuse of process, an abuse of the public purse, and a waste of taxpayers' money for nakedly political purposes.
But if this is a waste, how would you characterise those bigger $120 million spends? How would you characterise those?
I am focused on our watch and our time and our responsibility. Okay. And let me make this clear that we took a $50 million cut in advertising as a direct, clear election pledge. Julia Gillard, prior to the 2007 election, denounced public spending, and it is time to stop this campaign before it starts. It is an abuse and a waste of public money for an agreement which hasn't been struck, detail which hasn't been delivered, and legislation which hasn't even been published.
Well, I'm not trying to defend the government's advertising campaign here. I think it was a strange move to announce it today, but I guess they could argue that they're at least being upfront and honest about what they're going to spend. They're not squirreling away in the back of the budget papers how much they're going to spend. They've announced from the outset today $12 million before we even see the ads.
Well, they announced $12 million, but it appears that the global budget, the genuine advertising budget, is $25 million. If they were honest, they would say that this is a $25 million advertising campaign. And if they want a really honest campaign, they should take the carbon tax to the election and use ALP money to advertise for it during an election campaign, because prior to the election they weren't willing to use ALP money. After the election, they are willing to use public money to argue for a carbon tax.
Moving away from the advertising campaign to the actual policy itself, we've now had the Productivity Commission, Ross Garnaut and various others arguing that a price on carbon is the cheapest, most effective way to bring down emissions. And also today we've seen European pension funds saying with trillions of dollars to invest, they're going to be more likely to invest in Australia if a carbon price is introduced.
This system will drive up the cost of living for ordinary Australians. A carbon tax is an electricity tax. Electricity will go up by 25% in the first 3 years. It will drive up the cost of petrol, the cost of groceries and the cost of gas.
People will be compensated for that. I mean, the people will be compensated for that. The government's made that very clear. Pensioners, low-income earners will be helped.
Every fortnight we have a new alleged compensation plan which is partially leaked to the press. It changes thereafter, and what's absolutely clear is you simply can't compensate for people losing their job, and there is no question that this tax will hurt pensioners, seniors, families, low-income earners, middle-income earners, because that's what it is intended to do. It's meant to drive up the cost of petrol and electricity, the cost of living, so as to radically change the way people live.
Some of your colleagues have been growing increasingly concerned, though, about the politics of this changing once the government does announce those details of compensation. And given the language we've heard from the coalition about the unimaginable impact on the economy, about industries being wiped out, that you'll be left looking as though you've called the sky is going to fall in when it's not, and then having to take away compensation that people actually quite like. Are you at all concerned about that?
No, I'm not, because there are deep and genuine consequences. Only today we saw one of the government's key advisory groups say that there would be the risk of significant impacts on power supply, energy security, the certainty of our electricity supply at time of peak demand. That wasn't the opposition, it wasn't business. This is one of the government's own key advisors in a report which was buried. So there are real and genuine consequences, and wherever the tax starts, it's going to go up, because we know from the work of the Minerals Council and others that whether it starts at $15, $20, $22 or $25, it's going to have to be at $52 a tonne to use this method to achieve their targets by 2020, and what that means is a massive increase in the cost of living, and that is simply detrimental to people and detrimental to jobs, and there's a better way.
Shadow Climate Action Minister Greg Hunt, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, the other fire front, the